Okay, I'm going to do another episode in this series of TrueSpace. Oh, hang on just 1 second. Just got to get that out of there. Um, our Canon, I think, made a bunch of requests for new things uh, to demonstrate. So I'm really happy to do some of that stuff. Um, and moreover, I think what I'm going to do today. By the way, tell me if this is too loud or too soft. It seems like I might be clipping a little bit, but all right. So one thing I'm going to do today is refine the current Centurion model. The Centurion model is one of the oldest models in the game, and doesn't really live up to some of the newer textures. And since in 1.8 I'm going to try to have you buy a Centurion model or a Centurion ship through the shipyards, I figured I might as well try to update it to kind of a later version. Um, so this episode, I want to show a whole bunch of different, more advanced techniques in TrueSpace. I hope people will like that, and I'll try to get some of Arcanon's requests. In particular, they asked about how to actually do the animation frames for a ship, so I'll show that. Also, um, questions about how to do the types of piping that you see in some of the Chimera ships, that kind of stuff. So I'll show a whole bunch of advanced modeling techniques, and hopefully that'll be cool. But as always, please let me know if you have questions or if you want me to handle specific things. I'm also going to do a little bit on texturing, which I think I didn't do very much last episode. Um, so let's talk about the Centurion. Like I said, this is a really old model. Let's render it. I adjusted it a little bit. We don't usually see the Centurion kind of at this resolution and at this scale, and because of that, that's why I think you notice it looks pretty flat. There's not a lot of textures. There's a little bit of this is a little over. This is blown. It's just a little too white. And while it might look okay at a reasonable size, like if I do it down, let me do it down at its kind of normal size. At its normal size, it sort of looks like this. This is not a perfect model. I've actually made some changes already, but you can see already that it doesn't. It looks a lot better smaller because you just don't get as much of the detail. But what we for 1.8, eventually we want a hero image, and hero images are generally around 320 by 320. So let me this is, I think, 320 by 320. Is still kind of lacking in detail. So I probably want to add enough detail to make it look a little bit better. Okay. Um, let's talk a little bit about textures before I go too far. Um, like I said, this is kind of an old model, and so when I can use this eyedropper to pick up the texture, and you'll see the texture that I'm using here. Basically, it's just this simple bitmap image, and then no bump mapping, and then just a simple reflectance. In later versions, I've been using one of the newer reflectance shaders, which is called multi-paint, I think, or multi-layer paint. Yeah, this is a much nicer. This is a much nicer uh, reflection texture because it gives you a little bit more control, but also has a little bit of how should I say it kind of simulates a layer of translucent paint, which just gives it a little bit more realism. So we can try that out here. Combined with a little bit of texture, I think that usually ends up helping a lot. So let me do a little bit of little metallic kind of sheen, so it makes it a little bit shiny. Notice how you can get you get a little bit of reflection, a little bit. Let me just not reflect that much though. So we don't want too much. And then let's try that. So let's try. There's a couple of different ways to paint a primitive, an object once you've got it. If I just have a single object, like let's say a single cylinder, well, I guess in this case a hexagon, I can usually just use this button here. I don't know what it's called. It looks like just a paint, and this basically just 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 fills the entire object with that paint value. So if I change this to something else, well, this is all wrong. Let me go to find the right place. I gotta find my textures. Sorry, documents. Artwork. There. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so these are all the textures I use. So yeah, if I change it to one of these other textures and then I hit this button, it just fills the whole thing. So you kind of get that. Let's go back to our original, which I don't even remember now which one it was. I think it was this one. Yeah. Okay. But here's the thing. If you've got, oh, I can delete that. If you've got a complex object like this object already consists of a whole bunch of objects. And if I just press that button, it's basically just going to fill everything. And that's not what I want. What I actually want is I want to use this button here. This basically replaces a texture. So basically when I click on a texture, it'll replace that texture with whatever it is that I've got selected. So I'm going to click this button and I'm going to just click it here. And so now that's replaced it. And so let's see what that looks like. Doesn't look that different, although notice it's blown up more, which means I probably need to decrease the diffusion. So let me decrease the diffusion. I'll click it here so then we can see it kind of more of a live preview. Let's decrease shininess is probably, I don't want to make it too shiny, and I probably want to increase or decrease the size of the specular reflection. Whoa, now it's starting to look a little too dark. But you get where I'm going with this. Let me just get to a place where that's starting to look decent. Might still be a little too blown out here. That's starting to look a little bit more decent. Now check out something else. Look at these kind of weird lines here. This is done by the little metallic specular reflection that they add here, and this is controlled by the flake scale. Let me decrease that flake scale a little bit. It started at 1. Let's do 0.5. Yeah, so you start getting this interesting, kind of textured thing. We don't want it that big, I think. We want kind of a, see, now you get a very different, almost, kind of weird granular texture. So you know what? Maybe let's decrease the flake depth so it's not quite as intense like that. And then maybe now I can increase this. This is all, I mean, entirely trial and error. It's basically just trying to figure out what what looks good. That really is all. That really is it. It's just, what does it look good? And I'm, in my own mind, I almost always go back and forth in various ways. I'm going to actually go at a fairly large flake scale, because what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to add enough texture here that we'll get some pretty decent detail, and some of this will be hidden. Yeah, this is increasing the metallic look. Let me just, again, I'm just changing these things. You guys can experiment on this. That looks a little too flat now. Yeah, maybe 2 and 1. Let's try this. That's starting to be better. Okay, let me just take some questions. For hero images, do you always use the upward pointing facing at 320, 320? Yeah, I do. I actually do. Just that's the easiest thing for me, and so that's how I do it. That's probably what I would recommend for now, just to be consistent. I think in the future we'll probably want some more options, but that's how we do it for now. Polygons are still visible in that render on the right side. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not sure. Let me just make sure I understand where you're seeing polygons. It's absolutely true that you will see polygons once you shrink it down. For instance, once you shrink it down to this is 320, you won't see them quite as badly. But also, if you're referring to some of this stuff, that's some other texture that got added later. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. Let me just do this again so we can see. And remember also that the texture itself has kind of this radial pattern. So some of what you're seeing may be that rather than actual polygons. It looked like someone attacked it with a ball-peen hammer. Yeah, that's what this thing. That's this effect. It kind of has that. It's meant to be kind of a metallic feel. I'm not going to leave it like this. What you'll see as I work on this, what you'll see is I will add enough texture so that essentially just blends in the background. You'll see where I'm going. I hope. I hope we'll see. Now these guys. This is more on textures. These guys, and I think this is also probably something. These guys are actually essentially stickers painted on top of the surface. Let me see if I can find them. I think I have to. It's one of these guys. Let me select. So this is the actual object, and if I go here, yeah, sure enough, you can see this is basically essentially a sticker that I just pasted on. Originally, I intended to have this have little patches, almost like it'd been repaired, but I think in the end it doesn't quite look that well. So I'm gonna delete these now. Let me just there's a couple of these. There's that one. There's a patch over here. There's another patch there, and there's that patch that you can see there. Is that it? Yeah, those are it. So I'm going to just delete these. If necessary, we'll add them later, but I think it's best just to start fresh. So now if I do this, now it's just kind of the clean look. And then we can add, like I said, I'm going to add texture later. Is this to replace the regular Centurion? Yeah, I was just saying how this image has not been updated in so long that I just really want to come up with a better version, especially since I want to eventually come up with variants. Like, it'd be nice to have a variant of the Centurion for the Centurion X. It'd be nice to have a variant for the Rogue fleet, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I'm going. Atlas 5 launch scrubbed. Oh yeah, I was watching that. Too bad. It sounded like they were having some problems with the liquid oxygen loading or something like that. I'm actually also excited about hopefully tomorrow's test fire of the Falcon Heavy. That is going to be pretty amazing if you can watch it live. I don't know if they'll have it live, but that's going to be pretty amazing. All right, let's keep going. One more thing, just in talking about how I do these models. I think I've said this before. In order to just keep the scale for me, I usually create a little block here that represents the size of a person. So this is about 2 meters tall and about a meter in diameter, kind of sitting on the floor. And so that's just to help, when creating structures, particularly windows and hatches and all that, so that I can make them the proper size. Otherwise, you get into problems like J.J. Abrams' new, Star Trek reboot. the Enterprise has completely different scales depending on whether you look at the reference material versus if you look at the size of the windows. If you actually look at the size of the windows, I think it's much smaller than the reference says. So yeah, so those are the kinds of mistakes that I want to avoid. Last thing in terms of scale, this I'm doing all at essentially is it 10 meters per unit? So this is about 30 meters this way. I actually think that's probably too big. That's just the size that I originally created. I think that's probably too big, even for a heavy gunship. If you look at, let me load some other comparisons. I think I have the Space Shuttle Orbiter. This is a Space Shuttle Orbiter at the same scale, at about 10 meters per unit, and you can see how much larger this supposedly just gunship is compared to the Space Shuttle. I mean, the Space Shuttle is actually pretty huge, so I kind of think this really should be a little smaller. But you know what? Tough luck. Is what it is. I'm probably not going to shrink them down now. So we'll just canonically say that they're actually pretty large. Let me just read. Can you enable subscriptions? One of our own wants to subscribe. Subscribe to the channel? That's I thought I could do. I thought that was enabled, but I will. I'm happy to do that. I don't know how to do that though. Yeah, Centurions are kind of huge compared to many gunships. Yeah, I agree. And again, that's just kind of historic, and I think now we're just going to have to make the cannon fit. And I think that's okay. I think it'll work. I mean, if you compare this to the size of a sandstorm, the Ares sandstorm, the sandstorms are tiny. Seems pretty small for all the weapons and stuff, and their power level doesn't really match. Yeah, agreed. I think again, that's something that I would like to change. I think we've always one of the criticisms about the balance between Commonwealth and Ares is that the Commonwealth gunships are really underpowered, both in terms of weapons and shields and armor. So that's one thing that I think we can change. And certainly when in 1.8 you'll be able to buy one of these Centurions at either Shipyard or maybe Commonwealth Fortress or whatever. And I really think they should be just a little bit more powerful than they currently are. So we'll have to do some rebalancing, and I don't know exactly how that's all going to work out, but we'll see. Subscribe means follow and support the stream with $5. Oh, hey, I love that. I love any kind of support. Okay, I'll set something up. Because that's totally awesome. I always would love to have some kind of support. It just helps to promote the game. So thank you very much, and I'll set that up. Okay, let me read. Centurion does not seem as big as Manticore or EP starter ships. That's probably true. I think the Manticore absolutely I think is pretty large. The Manticore though, a lot of the space is taken up by those big arms. If you look at the cockpit on the Manticore, it's not vertically, not even I think big enough to hold a person. Let's just see. I think that's a Manticore. That's not quite to scale. Sorry, that's not to scale. Let me if I remember correctly, let me just look at the scale for a Manticore. Sorry. Sorry, not actually. I apologize. You guys can't see all this. I know you see some, but you probably can't see everything. 33. So the Manticore is 33 meters. So let me just rotate it properly so that it's consistent. 33. So 3.3, something like that. So actually, yeah, you're right. It's still pretty huge. I mean, look how huge it is. But you can see the cockpit is so small that it doesn't totally fit a person. So maybe the Manticore is another one of those things that we, have to rethink through. Or maybe that's not really a cockpit. That's just a sensor pod or something. Um, so yeah, the Manticore is big. But the Manticore I think is supposed to be pretty big. Even so, because of the spherical, nature of the Centurion, this still feels like it's got more volume, than this. This looks like it's the internal volume doesn't actually look that big, even though it is looking pretty big. So all right, well this is awesome. Um, this is always fun. Okay, so now let's continue. Let's go on with what we actually want to do, which is to try to um, make this model a little bit more detailed. So as I said, I want to just add some detail around here just to make it a little bit more just realistic. The engines I think are okay. I think I'd probably leave those. Those are pretty decent. I'm pretty sure they're cloned from some other model. I think they might even be cloned from the Meccano. I think if you look at the Meccano engines, they're that just scaled up. So but what can you do? So what I'd like to do is basically add some texture. The other thing I want to do, I I would like to kind of carve out. Let me see if I can do this, because let me copy this off. Copy this off so I don't screw it up. I would like to carve out kind of a little equatorial belt here so that we can add little greeble and maybe sensor pods and maybe even weapon mounts. I think that would be pretty cool. And the other thing, and I'm gonna use this. Let's use this texture maybe at that level. Again, I'm gonna flip to the multi-layer paint, and I'm gonna use a texture here. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, let me use kind of either that or this texture I love. That's a pretty decent texture for kind of greeble. Maybe two. We'll see. Yeah, good enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little block here. We'll go center it here. We'll make it only about maybe a meter high and enough to cover this whole thing. And then I'm just going to subtract out from this shell. See if that works. Okay, that's pretty good. So that's going to allow us to add just a little bit more complexity around the edge, because again, right now the edge is so smooth, it doesn't it's just not as interesting if we had some either weapon mounts or other stuff kind of sticking through. So that's kind of what I think we could do. One of these days I'm going to do a proper to scale comparison of everything in TBR, which will undoubtedly lead to redesigns and re-renders. So while you're on that subject, Transdata can do that, by the way. If Transdata, look at, I'll show you guys. Transdata, type images. You can't see this whole thing. Scale. So basically, if you say something like type images, criteria, ships, and then you say scale, and you say how many meters per pixel, and so maybe you say 0.1 meters per pixel. Is this going to work? This may not work, but we'll try it anyway. Okay, let's try it. Let's see if this worked. It didn't quite work. Maybe I did it 0.1 meters per pixel isn't right. I think it interpreted as 0. I think I want meters per pixel. How about 1 meter per pixel? Okay, that's better. That's better. So now these are, I hope you guys can see this. I think you can. Now these are to scale. The image just gets scaled up, so it's not necessarily the best, the highest quality, but it does let you do things to scale. So, all right. Sorry for that digression. Back to reality, already in progress. Why would you want to stick the cockpit in front of your ship and risk getting AK-64 ballistic cannon shot through the window? Yeah, that's an excellent question. The answer is always because it looks cool. Yeah. Also, George, can you make more devices that appear on your hull like the side-mounted weapons? Yes, yes, I like that idea. I would love to do more side-mounted stuff. I think that's, and I think, I mean, part of it is just time and getting it all to work. But it certainly would be cool if, you know, when you equip a weapon, even internal weapons, there's some impact on the sprite, on the actual image. But again, there's just a lot of that is tough. Centurions appear to be old classic UAS engines. Oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense because Meccano is a UAS ship. Canonically, I don't think that's true. I think that's unfortunately just my cheating laziness. So maybe at some point we pull an engine from an IE ship. I think if guys remind me, I think Centurions they're not IE. They're Pacific Defense. They're Pacific Defense. I think just like the Wolfen. So I think we'll have to pull some from that. Okay, let's keep going. I'd like to see a top-mounted Omni turret, the Omni version of a side-mounted gun. Oh, that's an awesome idea. That's a totally awesome idea. That makes perfect sense. Patch spiders would also be fun. They could move from segment to segment. Yeah. There's never enough time, but I really do love how there's so many potential for new ideas. That's one thing I love. I mean, I would hate it if we basically got to the point where the game was like, well, you know, nothing else to do. We don't know what else to do. We're never going to have that problem. There's an infinite number of things to work on. Okay, let's work on some of the texturing detail. I'm going to start with probably this. Let me just think about this because I also want to show some of these advanced techniques that I was talking about. Yeah, this may not entirely be related to the Centurion, but let me show you a couple of interesting techniques, even though this may not actually help for the Centurion. The first technique I want to show, last episode I showed a lot of techniques having to do with Boolean operations, so subtracting, making holes, intersecting shapes together to get interesting other shapes. Another way to get shapes is basically with this sweep tool. So imagine this. Let's imagine that we're getting. Let's imagine that we want to do some kind of greeble. Maybe even an engine part or something like that, right? So one thing we can do is we can basically start with this surface and use this this tool. The sweep tool basically just creates a new segment up like that. But now what's interesting about this is that I can now modify the new segment in a couple of ways. I can scale it, so I can maybe shrink it down, I can reposition it. If I hold the right mouse button down, then it's going to only move along the z-axis, and so I can basically do things like that. So I can do something like this. And then when I continue pressing this again, it'll basically do another sweep. It'll try to kind of follow the pattern that I set, but I don't need to honor that. I can just basically do whatever I want. So I can do something like this and then maybe sweep again. And now I'm going to start to maybe kind of do this kind of a shape, if you get what I'm saying. Let's keep just creating these little. So this is something that you might use, you know, to build maybe an engine or something like that, right? Or almost anything, any kind of a thing. So now you can see what I've done there. It's kind of an engine. And now another thing that you can do is you can say, well, look, what if you've got a fairly complicated shape? And then for that, you can use this tool. Let me show you this. Let's do a draw tool here. We're going to draw a little 2D shape. Okay, so I'm going to draw a little. Let's move this up out of the way here. I'm going to draw a little 2D shape, let's say like this. So I'm going to do something like, this is just kind of, like imagine this is some kind of rough, almost engine-like structure, right? You know, and I'm not spending too much time, obviously. You guys can do something better. And then maybe at that point I can close it off. Where'd my thingies go? I can close it, okay. And now, what I want to show you, so I've gotten kind of this jagged thing. Now I can use this other tool, the lathe tool, which will basically essentially rotate that shape. If you know what I mean. And I can control things like, well, I want it to go 360 degrees. I want it to go a whole way. I want maybe 24 segments, so that's, you know, how many around. Control the radius, control the rotation, and when I hit it, now I've created kind of that rotated shape. And again, for doing things like engines, for doing things like any kind of weird detail or greeble, I think that's a pretty cool technique. There's one more technique which I want to show, and there's a couple ways to do this. First, let's just imagine I do this with. Actually, I don't even need this. I can do it with this tool. Imagine that with this tool, I create a little circle. Okay, and now I use the sweep tool to kind of start creating a little pipe. This, you know, you saw before how I could create this pipe and make it bigger and smaller. But another thing I can do is rotate this plane a little bit. And let me make sure I bend it correctly. I can rotate this plane like let's say like, well, this is probably way too crazy, but like that. And then when I sweep again, that was probably way too much. You can see how I just continue to create this curved shape. And so something like, for creating chimera craziness, this tool is kind of what you want. You know, you can essentially do whatever you want. If you want to do that a little bit more reproducibly, there's yet another tool which I'm going to show you. Oh, that's Hilo. That's Hilo. Hi, Hilo. Okay, good boy. Poor Hilo. He doesn't get enough attention. Okay, so let me show you one last thing. Imagine that I want to draw a path. So what I'm going to do now is let me draw a little path. Whoops! Whoa! I hadn't seen that before. Well, that's going to be a problem. That's definitely going to be a problem. Oh well, that's okay. I guess now I probably lost a bunch of work. When was the last time I saved? Probably not not recently. Well, be careful, guys, because that is what happens. Okay, sorry. Let me load this up again. There we go. Oh, I think let me also recenter my app on the screen so you guys can see everything. That's pretty good. Oh, what a shame. I think I ended up losing a bit of work, but that's okay. It's not really a big deal. I can recreate this. We hadn't done very much, so I'm okay. Let me just show you the one thing I was going to show you. I think I can probably show you better in a path library. Basically, this little tool just shows a bunch of paths. And what you can do with these paths, let's create a new path. I'll try not to use that tool that crashed this time. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw out a curved path. Okay, let's say something like that. And what I can do with this path is I go to the path library and I can just add this path. So now that's kind of an added path. So now we can, oops, sorry, now I can kill that because I don't need that anymore. I've got it saved. So I've got my little path saved here. And now what I can do is let's start with another circle. Oops, I guess I need that. Let's do another circle. And what I can do now is do this macro sweep. Basically, I select that tool and I select the path. And basically what it does is it just tries to take that circle and sweep it along the path that I defined. So when I click it, boom, I kind of get this weird, again, this weird looking pipe. Now it's got kind of a weird curve, which means I screwed something up. And I think I know what I did screw up. Let's do that again. Right click and hit bend. You have to have that bend. And there we go. Now that's much better. So these are all techniques for creating, kind of weird looking tentacle structures. I think that's kind of what my whole point is for all this. So, all right, well, let's get back to reality. I'm going to have to recreate this, unfortunately. That's okay. Won't take long. Oh, the other thing I wanted to do, I wonder if I should have... added some kind of... Let's do that. Nope, still too bright. There we go. That's better. And I have to let me just save. And I think I have to get rid of the patches again, which is fine. Okay, delete, delete, delete. Okay. Let's do that. Pretty good. Okay. And you know the other thing, let's try. I didn't do this last time, but let's try setting up some texture here. Why not do that? This might be too much, and in fact, I may not want to do this. But let's just try it, just to see what it would look like. I'm going to set up a little bump map just to see. Again, we'll try this one. Let's see if that's. This might be way too much, so let me just try it. Well, that's obviously way too much, but we can try that. A little better, but probably way too. That's a little bit better. Maybe 2. It's a little bit better. That's not too bad. Let me save. Is there a way to deconstruct and remove details from the ship model to add in replacement details, i.e. the thrusters or guns? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean outside of TrueSpace? If it's outside of TrueSpace, I don't have any good techniques. You'd have to crack open the model, remove some objects, replace them, and then re-render the whole thing. We'd have to build a 3D rendering engine into Transcendence. So I'm not sure if that's the direction you're going, or if you're going, can you do it all in TrueSpace? And well, in TrueSpace, sure, you can do it. Let's suppose I want to use TrueSpace to remove the Centurion's gun in Summon. Oh, in that case, yes, you can. Here, let me show you. If you're just talking within TrueSpace, yeah, most of the time, a lot of these in the models that I've created, each of these are separate objects. So basically, if you look at, well, actually, this is probably not the right way to look at it. This object is a composite of several objects. So when I click the down arrow, it's basically saying I want to just see one of the pieces. And so you notice right away that when I did the down arrow, everything is selected, but now the gun is not selected. Left and right arrow flip between, one piece of the model or the other. So in this case, all I had to do was down arrow and then right arrow, and now I'm selecting the weapon emplacement. And if I hit delete, it'll just delete that weapon. It won't delete anything else. So you can see this better here. Yeah, so here I've got the weapon selected. If I left or right arrow, I select the body. So yeah, so in TrueSpace you can do that, and it'll be the same for the engines. If I keep on down arrow again, now I've got something else selected, and right and left arrow, I'll start selecting other things. Now here, for instance, now I've got one of the engines selected, and I could delete the engine and replace it with something else. So yeah, absolutely. That's composing objects using this tool. This is the tool that essentially glues objects together in either a hierarchy or related to each other. Let's suppose I want to insert an Omni turret on top of the Centurion. Again, it'd be very simple. I would load. Let's say I don't know if I have I don't know if I have a cannon here. Here, positron weapon. I would load some some object, or create the object. You don't have to load it, as you can just create it. But basically, you'd put it wherever you want to put it. I don't know, whatever. And then what you do is you select the ship, and you hit this glue as child, and then you click that object, and now this object becomes part of that model, and when this model rotates, everything rotates. So that's I think that's exactly what you want. And then if you want to remove it, you just down arrow and right and left arrow to select, and then delete, and now you're kind of back. So hopefully that's something that makes sense. Okay. Quick UI question: how do you pan the current view or rotate the view along a specific axis? It's a great question. The current view. Let me just get rid of that for a second. The current view, these are the controls that do it. So this control is what lets you go kind of panning around. And now, one thing that's interesting about these controls, and true for a lot of these things, is it works with both the right and the left mouse button. So if I use the left mouse button, like I'm on this selection, right? If I use the left mouse button to click and drag, I'm dragging kind of along that plane. If I use the right mouse button to click and drag, I'm going along one of these, the Z plane or whatever plane. I guess it's Z, I don't remember. So it does make a difference. And you can also control that if I right click on this thing. See how there's these things selected? These tell you which axes you're going to move. So if I unclick these and now use the right mouse button, I basically am constrained to just pan along the x-axis. I can't, no matter how I move, I never go on the y-axis. And that works also for moving and for rotating and for scaling. So you can kind of use those controls to limit to a certain axis. With this one, you're basically, again, left mouse button, you're just rotating around the center. Right mouse button, you're kind of doing a yaw, motion. And finally, with this one, this is the zoom control. Here, I do something like that. Left kind of goes up, forward and back. Actually, I don't know what right does. It seems to do the same thing. But yeah, so that's what these do. Yeah, I think these don't make a difference. Okay, so hope that helps. Did you show how to do 120 facings already? No, not yet, and I will do that. How much time have I got? Oh man, I'm already running out of time. This is unbelievable. Let me do that. Let me do that quickly, because that is actually one interesting thing that has some subtle details. Okay, let's do that. The way I did the 120 rotations is with an animation. I click on this button here, and that brings up this animation window. The animation window will let you essentially change, or animate the model. And I basically animate a rotation, and then such that every frame is one turn. So basically, every frame is one turn. So think about it this way. The way this works is up here is the timeline where the frame number is. So what I to animate, I tell it to go to frame 30, and I rotate this to 90. Okay, so now the ship has rotated to 90. The program will interpolate in between each of the frames, so I don't have to specify every single frame, rotate, excuse me, 3 degrees, 3 degrees, 3 degrees, whatever. It'll interpolate. But I do need to kind of give it a couple of key frames. So I usually do 30, 60. 60, of course, is 180 degrees. 90 is then 270 or minus 90. And then 120 degrees, we're back to 0. We're back to the original rotation. Let me just zoom this in. So you can see, and let me just go back. If I expand this, here are the rotation keyframes. So, we start out at uh, uh, 0 degrees. If I click here, now we're at 90. Here we're at 180, whatever. But there is a trick here. So let me just show you one thing. If I hit play, you'll see we start rotating. But there's one fly in the ointment, which I will show you. Let's stop that. Remember how I said that I only have to have a couple keyframes and TrueSpace will interpolate between them? Well, the interpolation is actually a little too smart. It's actually it basically does a little bit of an ease in and ease out. So I'll show you. If I actually try to go step 1, sorry, that's not. Did that work? Yeah. Notice that I just did one frame. I stepped 1 frame, and it's going 1.6 degrees, not 3 degrees. Right? So look, it's turning, but it's turning at these funny degree markers. And that's because it's trying to kind of make the turning smooth, so that it kind of starts turning slowly and then fast, and then by the time it gets to the other keyframe, it kind of goes fast again. So that's not at all what we want. So you got to be careful. What you have to do is, for each of these keyframe properties, you have to click this little button. This is the I don't know what it's called, but it's the continuity button, I guess. This is the one that says don't try to do any kind of funky, slow down, speed up in your rotations. Just rotate linearly. So you have to click every single one of these and click that and make sure that you've got this continuity set properly. So now I've got it set for all my keyframes. So now I'm good. Now I can close this. Or actually, now let me just step. Now when I step, watch this. Now it's going to be exact. 3 degrees, 6 degrees, 9 degrees. So now it's going to be exactly what we want. So every time we do a frame, it's going to rotate by the frame that we want. Now it's a simple matter to just do this render and basically say I want to render the whole modeler. I want to render all frames 0 to 120. I give it some file name. It's going to just add 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I do a 640 here to do the actual size, and then when I do it, it's just gonna, you'll see, it'll just create each one of these. It's just creating each one of the frames, saving each frame into a separate file. Now if you want to collect them all into a single file, you're going to need some program. I have a program called Luminous that does it. You can certainly steal that. Other people have other programs to make sprite sheets, so it's not super hard. Okay. It wants to accelerate and decelerate. Yeah, that's exactly right. When you set up the keyframes, it's trying to accelerate into the turn, and then decelerate. So which makes it look more realistic in a real animation. But for our purposes, that's not what we want. So okay, I can stop that because we don't need to go through the whole thing. One other thing to remember about this animation is once you set up this animation, if you make any further changes to the model, just make sure that you're back at frame 0. If you're in the middle of the animation, or if you're done with the animation, you end up at frame 120 and you start making changes to the model, then it'll count as another animation. Like for instance, let's say that I'm in frame 120 and I decide, you know what, I really needed to make this ship really needs to be a little bit bigger. What you'll end up with is now you'll have an animation at frame 120 where this is big, but if you go to the beginning, it's small again, and basically you'll have an animation of the ship growing. you know, which is totally not what you want. So so don't do that. So just and now I gotta go back and delete that. Yeah, that'll show up here. So I can delete that, delete this, but still have the rotation. Um, Perfect. Okay, so that's that. So hopefully that explains everything, or a lot at least. Let me fix one more thing because I think I've been moving my camera around. Yeah. That's because sometimes I move the camera accidentally. Okay, so I didn't actually get to do very much, unfortunately. But that's okay. I think I covered a whole bunch of really, hopefully interesting techniques. Let me do one last thing, and that's I'm going to do that subtraction again because I really want to start doing something better there. Artwork, blah, 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 textures. Okay, let's use this. Yeah, that's probably good. Make it 1 meter high, just to subtract out. Oops, that's not what I want. I want that. Again, I'm using the arrow keys to select a portion of the model. I'm going to copy that portion of the model, and then we're going to just save it away so that in case I ever regret what I'm about to do. Because once you do a subtraction or any kind of a thing, I mean, you've permanently modified that piece, and you can't get it back. So I always make a copy before I do those kinds of subtractions in case I realize that I didn't want to do that for whatever reason. Okay, and now I'm going to save it, and I think that's good. Okay, so pretty much out of time, but let me just do a few more things. Luminous gating effect. Let's watch this. Conway's game of luminous. That's awesome. That's hilarious. Yep. That's Conway. That's pretty cool. Wait, I'm gonna skip a bit. Alright, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's pretty cool. I love Conway's Game of Life. Gating effect 2. That's interesting. That's yeah, it looks like a bunch of transparent squares. That could be that might be an interesting nano damage effect, or even explosion, or even some kind of nanotech type of effect. Because I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty neat. One last one. Let's see. Whoa. That is crazy. That's pretty crazy. All right. Well, we can certainly continue answering questions. I've got a little bit more time. But one thing I wanted to say, one of these, I don't know what we'll do next week. I don't know if maybe I can do one more of these TrueSpace tutorials next week, maybe. But another thing that I'd like to do at some point is do an Anacreon playthrough. I think it'd be a lot of fun to play through an hour of Anacreon And the best part about that is anyone watching can basically join the exact same game, and we probably would not be able to find each other in an hour, but at least you might be able to kind of follow along and see how I build an empire, and then you guys can follow along building your empire. So I think that might be pretty fun. So I don't know if we'll do that next week or the following week or at some point, but I would like to do that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Let me see. Let me read some more stuff. Centurion should be Pacific Defense. Yeah, that's totally true. Sorry, these are pretty old notes here. The WAN show has sponsorship built in. On the other hand, a lot of small streamers really depend on the subscription income. I'm sure Twitch keeps at least half of it. Best thing you can do for George's purchase expansion or something. Yeah. Yeah, if you've already bought, this is one thing that's I'm working on, is trying to have more things for people to buy. One of these days I'll have Vault of the Galaxy out, and then I can start working on more stuff, more expansions. So yeah, I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, having a Twitch subscription never hurts. So I'm again, I'll set something up. Move the patch, add the new metal rim. I remember that. Yeah, I gotta do that. Also, you're probably going to hate me for this one, boss, but here's a bug. System image observations. Hostile stations, detonation, blah blah. Yeah, yes. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. None of that is ridiculous. I mean, I think those are all reasonable requests. As always, it's just priorities. I need to start resurrecting the master list concept so I can get people's priorities. More swag merch. One thing that I'd love to do, I just have not had time to do, but I think people might like. Well, there's a whole bunch of things that I think people might like. One of them is 3D models. I'd love to sell like 3D figurines of some of the key ships to scale and everything. I think that would be really cool. I haven't had a chance, and the models as they are, I experimented once with trying to get them through a 3D printing shop, and the models are a little too crazy. They have errors. The detail is just not quite right for what a 3D printer needs. So in any case, it's going to take some work. But I think that kind of merch, I think I would love. I mean, I personally would love to have those kinds of things. So I'll see if there's a way to do that. The other one that I'd like to do in terms of merch is some artwork books. I personally would just like that. I don't know if anyone else would, but I think it'd be great to have some books that just have a bunch of the artwork in the game, the models rendered at pretty high resolution, high definition, along with some of the original concept art that went into designing it. I think some of that would be fun. Probably expensive, unfortunately. I mean, art books, just because they're printed in full color, end up being expensive. So I don't know how many people would actually buy it, but I think that'd be cool. This one I really wanted you to see. Okay, let's see. Whoa. Yeah, this is an interesting. That's a pretty interesting effect. This looks almost more cybertech. This could be an effect either for artifacts or something like that. But God, that's an interesting effect. And if it weren't square particles, if it were like rounded particles, like orbs, that might be a really, really interesting damage effect. So that's pretty cool. This is really cool stuff. Um, how did you do all that stuff? At least you can theoretically 3D print your ships. I don't think there's a way to 3D print from POV Ray. Oh, that is unfortunate. Although, I thought you'd be able to convert the models to whatever 3D printing requires. Um, I'm thinking about a luminous hacking adventure. That's awesome. Those graphics look perfect for a cybertech, luminous type adventure. I think that's really, really cool and way better, in my opinion, than the neurohacking graphic that I have. Those fit better that flavor, the luminous flavor. So go for it. Go for it. That's really, really cool. Um, yeah, I really love it. I really love it. Um, okay. Let's see what else. Um, I'll certainly take more questions. I've been working on um, some improvements to buying ships. There's a couple things that I want to do for buying ships. The minimum is just make the UI a little bit better for selecting which ship you want to buy. Um, I want also to show, right now, for instance, the UI doesn't show what weapons or devices the ship has. It just gives you a rough, simple status. But I want to show the actual weapons and armor and shields that the ship has. Just make the graphics a little bit better in selecting ships. And also I want to add an option for not just trading in your ship, but buying a ship outright and having that ship follow you around. I think I talked about it in one of the tickets about how I wanted to do it. But that's all the kind of work that I'd like to do for 1.8. I think that's gonna I know a lot of people have been interested in that, and I just think that's going to add one more dimension to the game, being able to buy a stocked ship, at the mid game or even towards the end game. I think it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to play really, really well with player ship drones. I mean, basically, out of the box, you'll get the ability to buy a limited number of ships. Player ship drones now enhances that by letting you turn any wreck into a ship that you can use. Plus, player ship drones can just add a whole bunch of new ships to be for sale at new places. So I kind of think of this as a a piece that player ship drones will eventually exploit and make much cooler. So that's kind of my idea. Yeah, I actually, PM says sounds like PSD will be obsolete. I don't think it'll be obsolete for two reasons. Number one, the fun part. In fact, I'm going to give you three reasons why I think it's not obsolete. Number one, the field repairs I think is pretty cool, and that's something I'm not ever going to do because why would I do it? That Playership Drones already has it. Number two, the following code that I'm thinking of is not full-blown Auton or drone or wingman code. So I envision playership drones. Imagine that playership drones added a special item, a essentially robotic pilot that you had to apply to the ship in order for it to behave like an Auton or like wingman. That's something that I think would be cool. That again I wouldn't do in the core. It's something that playership drones would do. And lastly, playership drones, the core is not going to let you fly every single possible ship. Just I think the key ships, the most interesting ships. I think playership drones will still be the one that lets you fly a lot more ships. I don't know about everything, but a lot more ships. Now, whether or not you're interested in doing that, that's a different issue. I think that's up to you. So, I totally leave that up to you. I hope you are interested in doing some of that because I think it'd be really cool. But anyway, we'll see how that works out. In terms of compatibility, that's something that I would love to help solve because the way I see it, I guess I just see I just see playership drones filling that need of being able to have not just your ship and your wingmen, but a whole fleet of drone ships. I mean, that's the whole point of playership drones. That's not something I wanna step into, mostly because I think in the core it's really about you, the player, and your wingmen, and your autons. Playership drones, I think, just adds a whole new dimension on top of that. Excuse me. So yeah, PM says, but I'm not sure how I will update it to play nice with recent features. Um, um, I totally get it. The core keeps on jerking you around to a certain extent and forcing you to change things. I totally get it. I'll try to make things as easy as possible, but you got 30 million things going on, and 30 million interests. It's okay. We'll work something out. Um, don't feel obligated to make any changes if you don't want to. Okay. Let me read some more. Conway animation is made from an engine class. I made a pull request for the Conway. That's great. If you want to do essentially a new display type that lets you do Conway's Game of Life, I think that's pretty awesome. So I would totally do that. I'm happy to take that change. Sort of like the X Universe series of games up to Rebirth. I'm sad to say, but I'm not familiar with X. It's an amazing game, and certainly stuff that I've heard, but I'm not I've never played it. So I that's just one thing that I really should get a chance to play one day. I'd love to see some Steam trading cards, and there's lots of great artwork that could go on them. That's not a bad idea. That might be a fairly cheap Steam thing. The thing that I want to do in Steam next is achievements, but Steam trading cards might be easier. Let's see what else. I want to test George if George noticed my comment about rendering and rotation offset. Basically, a large amount of rotation offsets look really bad because the rotation is about a different point than the original render rotated about. I did see that, and I'm almost sure you're right, except let me just think about this slightly. I'm pretty sure you're right, but I think the effect is worse with the old rendering guidelines. In the old rendering guidelines, the camera was very, very close to the ship, and so any kind of artificial offsetting via that rotation offset would screw up the projection, because now you're at a different projection. So but with the current settings where the camera is very, very far away, I think the effect is going to be minimized. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be. I may be wrong about this, and it may still be off, but I think that's how to do it. The other possibility, I think, for ships where rotation offset just doesn't work, I agree. The solution is you just render in, you do the rotation offset in the program, even though that wastes a lot of space. In time, I will add some code to make that more efficient, to make those bitmaps more efficient. So that's kind of what I would say about that. As much as you try to maintain backwards compatibility, you're really kind of bad at it. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Every update you make manages to break something from someone else. You've even gotten me a couple times, and I try to be future-proof. I know. I thoroughly apologize. I mean, it's really just a matter of resources. It's very, very hard to test everything, and it's very, very hard to keep backwards compatibility. So I only do it if it's absolutely necessary, which, unfortunately, sometimes you guys bear the brunt of it. So I do buy that. Um, all I can say is there's places where I think you guys should feel free to push back. If there are cases where a breaking change is just so disastrous that, some key expansion is just totally busted, or it's just going to take so much work for you guys to fix, just push back and we'll figure out some way to make the backwards compatibility a little bit better. Steam achievements even more so would be great. Yeah, I kind of think achievements is something that more people are looking at. But again, it's just another thing I have to get on my list. My goal really is to finish Vault of the Galaxy, and once I get that finished, I think it's going to open up a lot of time to finish some of this other stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. Been playing around with multi-target Lancer where each shot gets aimed at different targets. Whoa, that's interesting. Thinking about adding a ticket for object get product to work on repeating set. Yeah, that's fine. Those kind of stuff is fairly easy to add. Currently, I use static data to storing a repeating stat. Yeah, it's not too hard to add those kinds of new properties, so feel free to add that ticket. For my Luminous hacking adventure, I'm thinking about making an anti-Luminous AI called Radiant and a Luminous agent that hacks into Radiant in cyberspace. Oh, that's really cool. That is really cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely let me know how that goes. I think there's a ton of stuff in Eternity Port, about Luminous and about, like, the virtual reality is called gray space. And I don't know exactly how that connects between the virtual reality in Eternity Port versus in Luminous, so maybe some of that we'll have to work out, but I think that's a great idea. Now about the rotation, that would be good, but there's a lot of old ships that are rendered with rotation about center. Yeah, there's not a ton of ships that have a rotation offset. There's enough, but there's not that many. There's the Corsair, if I remember. I don't know. There's got to be less than a dozen, I would say, that use a rotation offset. The ones that I worry the most are capital ships. I mean, tiny, small little gunships. It's not too efficient. It's not too inefficient to just waste a little bit of space and have the rotation offset be different. But a capital ship, you start eating up a lot of memory for basically some blank areas of the sprite. And my goal is to eventually add some optimizations where we essentially don't store black areas of the sprite, and so we can have a lot more memory. And in once I implement that, then it won't matter. It won't be inefficient to have a different rotation offset rendered baked into the image, and then I think it'll look much better. I tried giving some player ships a bit of rotation offset, but it was distracting. Yeah, I believe it. Especially, like I said, especially ones that are rendered with the old style. I'll mention that to Shrike and Wolf in particular. PM, you need to do that occasionally too. Yeah, about the backwards compatibility stuff. Also, have you looked at my PRs for EPCC and Stars of the Pilgrim HD? I haven't yet. I'm really far behind on looking at EP and Corporate Command. Like I said, I've been mostly all on part 2 right now. But I will. Like last version, I don't think I even released EP or CC, new versions of those. So the next version, 1.8, Alpha 5, or maybe Beta 1, depending, I'll look at EP and CC, and I hope that's going to be in a couple of weeks at most. Lots of green and lots of cyberpunk. Yes, absolutely. Not many ships have rotation offsets, but a bunch need it, and it wouldn't look good. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I take gray space to mean gray matter space, i.e. electronic brain matter space, and say that it's actually green. and it's full of square particles. I'm all for that. I think that's okay. I mean, the reason I think I called it gray space was because I thought of, if you think about how what it's like when you dream, all colors are a little muted. Um, it's hard to remember kind of some of the colors, and I kind of imagine the transition from the real world to kind of that virtual reality passes through this momentary dream state where everything looks kind of gray, if not even like pixelated and noisy. So I think that's kind of what I would imagine. Um, so that's kind of where I get that. As for full of square particles, I do buy that, and um, yeah, I could kind of see that. I mean, they'd essentially be voxels. You're talking about kind of voxels in 3D space, because it'd be very hard to to simulate down to a really high resolution level. So eventually, I think you'd zoom in and you would see kind of voxels, square voxels. Can you release TransArt update via GitHub? Um, it's I think it's GitHub is probably the least optimal for that, just because TransArt is all binary files. There's no actual text files. So I don't know if that's the right place for it, but I should release a new version. Um, Compression artifacts. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I can see that there'd be compression artifacts. Um, I could see that. Um, One recent pushback was send message that required messages to be explicitly strings. Numbers broke it. That got fixed. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I do unintentionally and thankfully was easy to fix. So that stuff, yeah, I mean, once you make me aware of it, it's not too hard to fix. Um, PM says first is Drake Tech, next is probably Godmod or Star Castle Arcade. PSD will probably be last of my major mods to be updated. That makes sense. Drake Tech I think is pretty awesome, and I think it's really worth updating. So I like that priority. Um, Means you won't have to zip a files. You just commit changes to Git and send those commits to the online. Yeah, no, I kind of get where you're going. It's not a bad idea. My only problem is it's actually not a bad idea. Um, it's I worry that that Git will yell at me because it's going to be super. It's huge files. Um, but maybe I can try to knock them down. Like, I mean, let's just how big. Let's just see how big this is. Just the models. Well, I mean, the textures alone are fairly extensive, but yeah, the texture they're not that big. Their textures are not quite that big. Let me sort by type. It's basically not the PSDs. You just want these. Let's just start with these. "82 megabytes." Yeah, see, it starts to get so big that I suspect GitHub is just not gonna like it. And the scene files are the same way. They're gigantic, or can be gigantic. I mean, they're usually multi-megabytes. But I don't know. Still, maybe that's the best way. Maybe I should. Yeah, it's 1.16 gigabytes. Still, maybe that's what I should do. And see if GitHub yells at me. Okay, what else? I still want to see Anacreon art. Git allows you to track binary files. It just won't tell you anything useful about them. You know, I did just see something about how you can set properties or something so that the files end up in a different repository, or not a repository, but a different store, I guess, where you're right, it doesn't track the diffs, and that actually is fairly efficient for them. So I'll look into it because that would certainly make it easier for me. So I'll look into it. Drake Tech is in dev hell, but it should be ready in a week or so, but new assets might delay that. I need to make more sounds. I need to get some new stuff out, like the Hellfire Torch. Oh, which is Diablo's Firestorm ported to Transcendence. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's such a good idea. I can't wait to see that. That sounds really cool. Okay, let's see. What else is going on? Anything else? That's probably about it for me. Like I said, my priorities now are I'm working on the next version of 1.8, the next alpha/beta version, and I will. That's when I'll do some of the shipyard stuff, which hopefully will be interesting. And then I think what I'd like to do. Basically, my schedule is going to be get a 1.8 version with the shipyard stuff and all. I mean, there's been a ton of changes to 1.8. Get a bunch of bug fixes, release that, and while you guys are testing that and playing with it, I'll continue working on part 2 and heading towards a 1.9 release. So we'll do a 1.9 release, with a lot of the part 2 changes, and then my goal is mid-year, sometimes summer, to have a final version of part 2. I don't know if I'll make it there, but that's my goal. I already set up a Transcendence repository on GitHub. Yeah, no, I saw that. I just, like I said, it's GitHub. One of the policies of GitHub is to not abuse it with a ton of binary files, and so I don't want to get in trouble. But like I said, I think they've got some new places, some new ways to store binary files that might actually be much better. So I'm with you. You've convinced me. I'll try it out. Okay, I think that's probably it for me. It's about time for me to go. Yeah, exactly. Large file service. That's exactly right. Large file service. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. So I think that's it for me. I think I'm going to go make some dinner for my family. But thanks for watching. I know I didn't get too far in the actual model, but hopefully I shared some tips. And next week, let me know in chat if you guys, or on the forums, if you guys want me to do another TrueSpace session, or if you guys want me to do an Acreon session or some third option. We'll figure that out. But let me know if you guys have a preference. But thanks for watching as always. This is it's always fun to see, to hear questions and to talk to everyone. So thanks everyone, and I will see you all next week. All right, bye-bye.